without further ado, I'd also like to welcome Dr. Arthur Feinberg. Do we have his slides coming up? See, there we go, perfect. Yeah, he's a postdoctoral researcher and newly joined member of the Business Society Management Department at Rotterdam School of Management, and will be talking to us about urban commons and community resilience.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think you were anticipating a little bit. I'm not yet a postdoc. I'm starting in April. For now, I'm still working as a public civil servant in France, in the Alps, working with local citizen initiatives and supporting them. And today, so that's the button, right? So this is the topic that I want to discuss with you today. There's many keywords that you know already, so social interaction, resilience, commons, so maybe I should actually work out of here. But I take this really great honor from the Tino de Moor's invitation to just give you a broad oversight of this topic. I think community resilience really matters for many of you people, and especially how we can build it from social interactions. So to do that, I will especially focus on the urban commons, because that was the topic of my PhD thesis. Community resilience is basically the ability of a group of people to face disasters, to face uncertainties and crises. How do we do that? By successfully self-organizing around a shared objective. That requires involvement of a community, mutual assistance, people are helping one another, in order to build trust and social cohesion. And for this, I would like to also follow up on Karin's words about trust. It's a wonderful example of how trust is actually building throughout the community that in the first place would not be able to meet. So you do not actually need to have trust before starting to collaborate. It just slowly builds up with time and interactions. Now the urban commons, it's a widespread example of community-based practice that if you know Tina's work, probably you've heard this word thousands, millions of times. But in this case, I worked on the urban commons, so logically in the urban space, but also present-day commons that we can still observe nowadays. They've been growing for the past 15 years a lot and all around the world. So what is it? It's basically three elements. You have shared resources that the people care of. There is a need at the basis of this. There is a community that decides to create or maintain such resources because of their needs. And thirdly, they require a certain system of rules, what we call a governance system or institutions, to be able to facilitate the self-organization. So what we observe usually is there's trust in these communities, there's social cohesion, and learning happening, again, as what you said, Karin, before, and that sums up to a more adaptive community and potentially more resilient. But there's often some cases, there was a figure before talking about 2/3 of initiatives failing. I think there's even more than that, especially in the commons. So a lot of them actually collapse because of conflicts or misuses of resources. So my research was actually on this topic and what to figure out why do they collapse and how do we make them last a little bit longer and reach more resilience over time. Urban commons are very diverse. They have multiple fields of researchers and practitioners working on it, but there's also very different types of resources. There could be material resources, such as land, water, energy, bicycles for the repair shops, for example, but also more immaterial resources, such as knowledge or art and culture. So all these resources basically are maintained by a community within a commons. The diversity also extends to the property regimes that are involved in such commons. Basically, that actually came out as a surprise for me. I thought initially that it would be only on public spaces or common spaces, but actually It can range from shared spaces, open access regimes, all the way to private regimes. Even on private lands, gardens, you can have commons happening. It all depends on what rights and what roles you give to the community members, basically. So what matters is not the type of property you are on, it's more about what rights you give to the community and who can do what in the community. Why the urban commons matter and could interest you or have interested you because you're already working as practitioners on this field, there's many benefits, but it really depends on the country and the context where you are. It could be for livelihood, basic life needs. It could be for value co-creation, providing new services of general interest, developing a stronger collective identity, or better knowing each other as well. Just throughout gardening, you meet new people that you would have perhaps never met, and that also fuels the inclusion discourse. Now, my question was to figure out why and how can we make them last longer. So I did some experiments in some urban gardening communities in Netherlands and Germany, basically simulating the participation in such communities and their behavior. So I measured the success with duration, trust, and cohesion. And the question was, what are the rules within this community that make it work longer and better? So to do that, I will not go into the details. I think some of you know this diagram from Ostrom literature, which is the institutional and analysis design framework. But basically, the model, the simulation model that I used, social simulation, was 3 parts. You have the left parts here, where you define your resource system, the people, what motivations they have, what beliefs, and the rules that they will agree on or are pre-existing. Then you look at, okay, how do they interact based on this, and then what are the outcomes? And from these outcomes and how they are evaluated will also affect and influence back the nature of your community and your resource. It could decrease, increase, the people can start to leave because they're not satisfied anymore, or new people can come in, they might change their perception of things, etc. The results were, there is actually no perfect recipe, no perfect ideal one rule. Sorry about that. It's more about an intimate combination of rules that will make it work better. But this you need to find it for yourselves. It's really context dependent. There's no one set of perfect rules. And this also applies to the case of sanctioning. Sanctioning is known from Ostrom to trigger more to help collective action because it makes people respect the rules. But in many cases, such sanctioning measures did not work out. It turned out to actually decrease the quality of the collective action. And here in the diagram, you see many cases where in this diagonal here, this one, high sanctioning also led to non-successful scenarios. So this is one of the results I got. The second one, still going back to the resilience part. How do we get there? So I did more or less with the same model. I tried 3 hypotheses that would make me believe that commons can reach more resilience or help getting there. One is from the interactions, can you get more trust? Can you get more social cohesion? And does it work better with smaller groups? I did work on a food cooperative in Amsterdam that you might know. It's called Kaskantine for this experiment. So this is one of the diagrams that you can get. You just look at in yellow and blue the values for trust and cohesion, and in red to the right the participation rate of the people. This is just a basic one-shot result of one model, one simulation run. So it's not the main result, but you accumulate this data and you figure out, according to, in gray are the rule violations. There's also conflicts that were put in to simulate real life scenario, basically. And the conclusion of this was that we could actually measure significant trust and social cohesion emerging from the social cohesion, from the social interactions. And the second one was that lower group sizes did indeed produce more trust. But that came at the price of a shorter duration of collective action. Again, in my model, it's not reality. I should make more observations on this. But this is probably due to the fact that if there is a smaller group, there is less manpower to actually maintain the resource, and also less manpower to go out there, talk about the initiative, find money to support it. Below is just a diagram with a few concepts that I've mentioned today. We're not going to the definitions, but it's just to say that resilience relies on a certain level of social capital building, which depends on the things that I've talked earlier, which are involvement, mutual assistance, trust, and cohesion, which also depend on smaller group sizes. The final diagram of all this is this blue pyramid, in which you have three components that make it joined together into community resilience. You have the urban commons that provide certain services or goods to a community, and community agrees on certain rules or governance system, and all this piling up with the right tuning that you need to find out in every single case, sorry again about that, to more community resilience. Further research on this that some of the speakers have already mentioned, so it's not any more to do, or still in the process at least. One is study the social learning. There was learning also in Karin's example with one another. There's also the idea of working with local authorities. This would be the case with the work of Thomas and Tina with the cooperatives, especially in the Netherlands. And the idea of replicating community resilience, which also connects to Thomas' work with scaling across. And that's also something that I experienced myself as a civil servant in France, supporting local initiatives. We actually helped them build a network so they would decrease some operating costs, basically, but also help one another and go out there and help their capacity to get some money. Instead of everyone individually asking for subsidy money to governments, they would collectively do it and have better chances instead of competing against one another. So thanks a lot for listening to me. And there's a few copies of my PhD book just out there on the table if you are curious to know more. Thank you.
Thank you.